Okay, welcome to the WPIAL Blitz Show. My name's Bruce Badgley. As always, my sidekick there, the man, Ian McMeans. Ian, we've got a very special guest with us tonight.
Yes, we are honored to have Woodland Hills head coach Brian Tarrant on with us tonight. Thanks for joining us, coach, taking time out of not only your busy football schedule, but it's your anniversary. So, first, happy anniversary. And second, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks, fellas, for the anniversary wishes. And year 13 married. So, you know what I mean? Took 15 minutes away from it just to share some football talk with you guys.
Well, we won't take too much of your time, but you guys are coming off a really hard fought, gritty victory over Gateway, who's kind of been a traditional rival for Woodland Hills over the years, and now have to prepare for a Franklin regional team, which had been unbeaten in conference play up until last week when they lost to a Penn Trafford team that you guys beat a few weeks ago. So, how's your team feeling now heading into the tail end of the regular season, and you've clinched a playoff berth, but have a chance to win the conference title this week?
I'll tell you what, Ian, we're feeling good that we made it out of there. Like we say about it, with a 1 point victory, and it was a very very tough game by Gateway. You got to tip your hats to Coach Hall and his boys. I mean, they kept us off balance a lot. We didn't know what was coming. We managed after a few mistakes there late in the fourth quarter to pull out the win and block a game winning kick. But feelings are, we're feeling good about ourselves, but at the same time, if you don't think back to last year, if we recall, we went on a 5 game winning streak last year and we lost our final two. So, right now we're reflecting on that aspect and really trying to stay focused to finish these here last 2 weeks out, especially this here week coming up with Franklin and the conference being on the line.
Did you have any special, a lot of coaches have, a certain motivating cry for a particular season. Was there anything special that you had to, motivate the guys for this year that you started, through the off season and now through the regular season?
The funny thing, Bruce, is the kids are, I was blessed to inherit a group of kids who are really, really focused. They wanted to win, they wanted to change in the program, and they kind of just go by what I say, and then they really attack it. There wasn't a motivating or battle cry or anything. Our thing is always handle our business. We feel like if we handle our business, with our talent, you know what I'm saying, that we'll be okay. But it's when we get into personal fouls or silly penalties and things of that nature where we really start messing up. So our thing is always handle our business, take care of what we have to do your assignment, and we expect things to work out. We expect to make plays because we have I mean, again, I said this summer we have a very deep wide receiver core. We're talented in the running back position. We just feel like if we block our guy, that our runners and ball carriers can make plays. So that's all we're looking to do is just do our job and do it as efficiently as we can.
So the way last season ended for your team with, you guys having a winning record overall, but missing out on the playoffs because of kind of how all the tiebreakers worked out and everything else. And it wasn't just your team, Upper St. Clair went 8-2
Exactly.
overall and missed out on the playoffs. So there was some, just the way the WPIAL had set up the playoff structure last year that, and the limited amount of teams in 5A that made it, did that really, serve as some off-season motivation for you guys to come out strong? I know the playoff field expanded this year, so there's a little more margin for error, but I just in the back of my head had to think like, you guys and Upper St. Clair both have really come out of the gates firing this year, and it seemed like that was a huge motivation for you,
And
the
it
way you both missed the playoffs last year.
and it really was. It really was. We were a little bitter about not making it in. We realized it was our own doing. As I said, we didn't beat Pine Richland weeks 9, and we lost to Penn Hills week 10 without our starting quarterback Cam Walter. But at the same time, we feel like we had done enough. Obviously, we were 3 Gardner points short. But at the end of the day, it served as a major motivating factor this year. We wanted to make sure that we got in by our own abilities and not waiting on the committee to select us and or decide if we could play in the postseason.
Well, that's what I was kind of driving at because of what happened last year. Was there this special that we're not gonna we're gonna keep it within these four walls of who's going to decide our fate. We're not going to rely, you know, on the committee yet. This year, with the change in the rules, now that there is, this committee, that there is the human element involved, it's a little bit different. Talk a little bit about that too. That obviously you're going to make it in, but then there's the human element of the committee that's going to assign, your seating or whatever like that.
Yeah, and it seems to I'm a little confused about it a little bit because it seems like they can pick almost anybody as the third seed, not just the third qualifier or the third finisher in the
Sure.
conference. So, you know, as I said, I'm going to let the WPIAL deal with the criticism on that because I know there's going to be a ton of it. But at the end of the day, I'm glad they expanded the field. I think 5A is one tough division. I think it's the toughest division, and I've coached in at least four of the 6As. So again, 5A is just a major war. I don't want to use that phrase. It's just a major challenge every week. You know what I mean? There's great coaches, there's great ball players, great traditional institutions that are always going to be good, like Pine Richland, and so again, man, I'm just glad that the committee expanded the field. But as far as picking the that third qualifier, or I don't know how that's going to pan out with WPIAL fans. Somebody still might get the short end of the stick there.
It'll give us something to talk about, but I don't know if that's a good thing or a
That
bad
is,
thing.
yeah. We don't want to talk about stuff like that. We want to talk about, players on the field and everything else, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
absolutely. Yeah, we
agree.
love telling the good stories of what's happening. And speaking of good stories, one of the things we like to try and highlight on the show is to give shout outs to the guys who don't always get their names in the paper. So, Cam Walter set the school passing record this year. He's having a great year. Scoop Smith's having an awesome year. He was our player of the week last week. But, if you want to take a minute, give a shout out to your offensive and defensive lines, because that's where we're big fans of the guys in the trenches, and that's where it all starts. So, if you want to get them some airtime and get their names out there, we
Yeah, well,
love
I
to give
mean,
you that
our offensive
opportunity.
line is real. Our offensive line is a really gritty bunch, inexperienced bunch, but week by week they're getting more experience. You got two senior starters that we have back, which is Nasir Neal, our left guard, and our right guard, Jaden Estes. Jaden is a team captain as well. He's number 55. Our starting center is Marcus Mullins. We call him the Wizard, though. We call him Wiz. And again, he's number 77. We got a freshman, Sincere Campbell, who is 6'3", 305 pounds, 15 years old. Gonna be a really good ball player here in the WPIAL. He's our starting left tackle, and then we platoon two guys on the right side, Big Roland Askerniece, and then we also have my man Big Matt Jenkins, number 75. So kudos to the fellas up front who move the defensive front for us and get that running game going and get that Wolverine offense clicking.
Yeah, and speaking of that, you touched on the fact that you had some really good skill guys, coming back. For you, philosophically, as a coach, and obviously you've been doing this a long time, is your philosophy one that you're trying to mold your players into a system that you've found to be successful, or are you actually trying to mold the system that you're going to run that year around the talent that you possess?
That's a good question. We were just talking about this a little earlier, me and my offensive coordinator, Maurice Walker. Our system is tailor made for our quarterback. Cam Walter is a very cerebral ball player. When I got here, I've always known him by seeing him in the area, as he grew up playing sports in the sports scene. But when I got here, I was very excited because I know he's a hitty ball player. So we devised an offense where he would have some options at the line of scrimmage to put us in the best position to win. So Cam has done a great job, selecting the right plays, pulling the RPO, throwing the RPO whenever he sees fit, whenever the defense presents this or presents that. So we designed this offense to definitely around his skill set. But when Cam's gone, we were just joking today that we might have to go back to the drawing board and draw up another offense because I just don't see another kid. And of course, there probably will be, but I just don't see another kid being able to step right in here and do the job that he's done. He's almost like a coach on the field. So we're really, really proud of what Cam has done and thankful that he leads our offense in the way he does.
Do you feel like, and you've been coaching for a long time, this is just an idea that's kind of bouncing around the back of my head, but do you feel like with the sort of proliferation of off-season training facilities and extra coaches and everything else that's available, that like the younger players now are much more prepared for high school football and have a higher skill level, and maybe, coming into to high school ball than they had, a decade or so ago? Because, I feel like we see these freshmen like throwing for all these yards. I'm like, how are these freshman quarterbacks this good? But they've had, specialized quarterback training since they were in like sixth grade.
Yeah, I mean, just this past weekend against Gateway, we're playing against a freshman and Dino, Elvis, Zucaris. I can't pronounce his name exactly, but this kid's, a freshman, and he's hanging right in there with the Wolverines, and you don't expect it, but like you said, maybe it's something with the 7-on-7, the year-round calendar year of football now. The personal trainers, the personal coaches, the quarterback coaches. Maybe that is giving these kids, an extra edge, because obviously, when I was in school in the '90s, it wasn't that way. You know what I'm saying? We played football for maybe 3 months, then we moved on to something else, and everything was so itemized by 3 months. But again, I mean, you even got your soccer and all types of sports. Mostly all of them are year round now. So, I guess that is a good reason to that says why kids are so mature and why they're a step ahead of the game and why they can pick up such complex offenses like the one we run.
And we touching on the fact too that you've been coaching for a good bit. Um, Talk a little bit about how kind of the proliferation of money in the game has put maybe more pressure on coaches now than ever before, because just what you talked about, there's so much investment, forgetting about the time that a family is putting into their son to get out on the field, the investment that these families are making in just what you talked about, 7-on-7. Some of these traveling teams are going, and especially out of Pittsburgh there, there's some big time 7-on-7 national programs, all of the training that goes on for these kids and what have you. And look, money equals pressure,
Yes.
and these
Yeah.
families have invested in these kids. So how's that kind of, trickle down to coaches and that much more pressure on you in how you're evaluating, your talent and who's actually playing the game?
Yeah, because there's a lot of reasons why you play who you play. All the time, it isn't just ability, you know. But at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you got a competent ball player out there. I'm telling you what, we have a freshman, Carter Akins, right now that I am absolutely certain can go out and compete on the high school level. But we do have like seniors in front of him and juniors in front of him who have already worked their tail off, and you don't want to rob them of that opportunity just to put a younger kid in, because again, we feel like the younger kid has time, but nowadays the pressure is there to I was just saying to myself, I got to get Carter into the game,
Yeah.
and that's
Look,
just one example.
D1 film. Okay. I mean, it's freshmen and sophomores that are getting the Power Five looks.
Yeah.
And that's what I talk about as well, is like the Power Five looks in as far as how the recruiting process is so accelerated that these freshmen and sophomores have to be like on point and with uh and be a projection, estimated projection of where they're going to be so early on. That's got to put a lot of pressure on coaches.
Yeah, and you also try to play. I know we try to on our staff. We try to play as many kids as we can. If you're ready, we'll get you on the field. Now, that may be in a 3-to-1 ratio. 3 series for the starter, 1 series for you. So you may get 2 series at a half, maybe just 1 series in each half. So we try to develop a system so the players fit in it. They have an expectation. You know what I mean, and they know that, okay, I have a starter in front of me. He's doing well. He's great, not well. I may only get 2 series in here. Now that kid may go out and intercept the pass on his 1 series. You know what I mean, and vie for more playing time. But again, you just have to keep balancing it, and trying to keep your best 11 on the field, keep them healthy, and win football games. But there's definitely pressure from parents because of their investment in their kids. They want to know why they're not playing.
Sure, sure. Ian, you have a final question for Coach on his anniversary?
I do. Yeah, we won't keep you too much longer. But going back to the off season, with the realignment and everything that happened, Woodland Hills had the opportunity to play in a lower classification and opted to stay up in 5A, where you had competed in previous years, for every year this cycle, or since we moved to 6 classifications. But was that a difficult decision for the program, or was it kind of like, no, this is where we've been playing, we can be competitive here, we want to stay here, and this is the best opportunity for us?
Yeah, for right now, this is definitely the best opportunity for us. We got a goal to win the 5A title, and with the group of kids we have right now, we feel like we can compete with 5A football teams. We were always a quad A powerhouse, so there's never the urge to go down lower than quad A. But right now the plan is to stay put at 5A until we do another realignment and count all our kids again, and then we'll reevaluate it then. But right now, the funny thing is we could have, and there was some deep thought about going to 3A, but again, we're going to stay where we're at and continue to compete with the teams that we have natural traditions and rivalries with.
Yeah. And I mean, I grew up in Western Pennsylvania. I still live here. As a Western Pennsylvania football fan, I love seeing those traditional rivalries continue. Yeah. And so I'm a big fan of, keeping the Woodland Hills Gateways, Penn Traffords, Franklin Regionals. I mean, you're all right there geographically too.
Yeah.
So it makes so much sense for travel time.
Agreed. Geographically, there's just no better place to play. I mean, Gateway comes 20 minutes to our place. We're 20 minutes to their place, 10 minutes to Penn Hills. So yeah, we want to stay put for a lot of reasons, but mostly is the traditional rivalries that we want to keep.
Yeah.
Wow, incredible, Coach. Listen, thank you very much for spending some time on your anniversary after practice.
Hey, I mean, if I go up and get slapped, it's your fault.
Well, listen, thank you so very much. We appreciate your time. All the best this year, my friend, and thanks a lot. Just go ahead and exit out, and Ian and I will continue on.
Thank you, fellas, for having us. Have a good one.
Thanks a lot, man. Take care. Appreciate it.
Best of luck the rest of the way, Coach.
Yes, sir.
All right. Take care. Incredible. Hey, yeah. I asked some tough questions tonight. What was that all about?
I don't know. We both asked some difficult questions, and Coach handled it great. That was we really got into the weeds of things that, just ideas have been bouncing around our heads of, asking about, off-season training and all that stuff. But I think it's a good topic to discuss too, because especially for, Coach Tarrant, that he's been around and coached for so long, that he's seen how the game has progressed over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, he was very candid in the school's approach to remaining 5A. Now, that's not the status quo in the WPIAL. It's been pretty evident that a lot of schools have just gone the way of how they were classified, and they weren't going to buck the trend. But not Woodland Hills. I mean, this is where we're at. We don't care if we're like, 1 student short or 50 students short. We're playing 5A football because that's who we are. That is our, our culture, our mantra, our tradition. And kudos to Woodland Hills for putting tradition over anything else when it comes to classifications.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, but I think they've been justified in their decision, considering the fact that they've been able to, qualify for a playoff berth already. They're playing for the conference title this week. So they've certainly lived up to the expectations. And I know the expectations at Woodland Hills is very, very high, considering their long history and tradition of success. But, it's one of those things where they had an opportunity to, potentially play in a lower classification where they probably could have, they could have
run the gamut. They could have run the table.
Exactly. They had that opportunity, but they said, no, we're going to play in a higher classification. But I think also, not only with the traditional rivalries, the travel time, I think, is a big issue for a lot of schools when they're trying to decide where to play, is looking at, who are we going to be in a conference with? How far are we going to have to travel? I know a few years ago, Apollo Ridge opted to play up from 2A to 3A basically for travel reasons because they had, I think, 6 opponents within 25 miles if they played up, and then 1 within 25 miles if they stayed down. So it's one of
Yeah,
those things
not
where,
sure.
travel makes a difference, traditional rivalries, but also, Woodland Hills is loaded with talented players. And if you want to get your kids exposure, if you want to get them in, the KDKA games of the week, the games that are televised every week, the Trib Live High School Sports Network broadcast, like if you want to get your kids noticed, playing in those higher classifications is a benefit because you're just going to get more press at those games.
Oh, and that's why that's what kind of led to that whole question related to, you know, like you've got, and he touched on it. Okay, you've got one standout freshman, and you've got these families of these seniors who have invested all this time and effort into there. And he said, maybe should be playing the freshmen, but these guys have and families have invested all this time, money, and effort. They're going to play. I mean, really kudos to coach for really telling it like it is.
Mm-hmm. And in some respects, it's easier for younger players at small schools to get on the field because their rosters aren't as big. But when you're in
Sure.
a bigger school, and you're a freshman, sophomore, it's just harder because you have so many more players on the roster. When you only have 30 guys on the roster, there's not as many guys you're competing against for playing time. But I liked what he said about trying to rotate guys in and, take turns on series and also about designing an offense specifically for their quarterback. Like that just speaks to the talent of Cam Walter. And yes, he broke the Woodland Hills passing, career passing record this year, and he's a great player. But just what he's able to do from a between the ears standpoint of calling, essentially, coach said calling his own plays, and they set it up to maximize his skill set. And those are the most successful coaches that we've talked about this week in and week out. That those that design an offense, a defense, a scheme to fit the players that they have are always the ones that tend to have the most success and aren't trying to shoehorn kids into this is the system we're going to run. You have to do this.
Yep, absolutely. All right, you got control. Let's do this.
All right. So we've got a big show tonight. Thanks everyone for
The
joining us
big
on a
show.
Tuesday night. As we enter week 8, which will be the penultimate week of the regular season. Thanks to Coach Tarrant from Woodland Hills for joining us, and everyone who has joined obviously knows how to find us on YouTube. So let's talk about some big results this week. There were some big games this week. There were some really big games. I mean, there were 7 or 8 games that decided who's is probably going to win conference titles. So McKeesport beating Mars, Amani Christian smoking Deer Lakes, Elwood City pulling it out in the fourth quarter against Riverside, Neshannock beating Southside Beaver, and Clairton beating Leechburg were the biggest wins of the week because those were all for the top spots in their conferences, as were the next 2 games I'll talk about. But these were our games of the week also just because of how exciting they were. Upper St. Clair scoring a last second, there was like 30 seconds left in the game. They threw a 30-yard touchdown pass to beat Bethel Park in a battle of undefeated teams. Fort Cherry and Bishop Canevin, these 2 teams, they went back and forth all game. And then Fort Cherry was down like 34-28 midway through the fourth quarter, scored a touchdown to take a 1-point lead. And then Canevin threw a pick 6 and fumbled twice, and Fort Cherry kind of ran away with it in the end. But like until those last 4 minutes of the game when Canevin committed 3 turnovers, they were just back and forth all game. It was a heck of a matchup. That's a really good Canevin team that just had some unfortunate turnovers in the end. And then Jeanette was up big on Brentwood. Brentwood stormed back to take a lead, and Jeanette went on a big drive at the end of the game and came back and scored a 2-point conversion to beat Brentwood. So heck of a game by Jeanette in a really important game in the 1A playoff race. The
Yeah, I
upset of the
guess.
week, I don't know if it's fully an upset, but I'll call it that for the purposes of I needed an upset of the week. Franklin Regional had been undefeated in conference play, but Penn Trafford, I think this was like their 6th straight win over Franklin Regional. So Penn Trafford's really had their number, and Penn Trafford's only loss in conference play was against Woodland Hills, so who Franklin Regional plays this week. So, you know, maybe an upset, maybe not quite, but Penn Trafford gets the upset of the week. And then Seneca Valley beating Hempfield, very noteworthy in the 6A playoff race, and Southmoreland's win also noteworthy in the 3A Interstate Conference.
I guess the Clairton defense gave up a touchdown this year. I mean,
they did. It wasn't until the fourth quarter though. I think they were up like 36-0 at that point. But
yeah,
Clairton's defense did give up points for the first time all year. So they made it, what would that be? 30 some quarters without 31 quarters without allowing a touchdown. Like that's pretty incredible.
pretty incredible as well. Elwood City continuing this, storybook run of, now going for a conference championship.
Yeah, and this was a gritty, tough game that Elwood City had to win. They had to come out and Riverside is a really good defensive team. They've played a lot of low-scoring games this year. This was their arch rivals. They're neighboring districts right next to each other. They've got a trophy that the winner of this game gets every year. They call it the Rivell Cup. And this was a hard fought game. Elwood City was down 9-6 going into the fourth quarter and had to put together a touchdown drive to win this game. So, but that bodes well for Elwood City that, in those clutch moments, you learn a lot about yourself as a team. If you're just blowing everybody out every week, sometimes when you get in those clutch moments, you don't know how to perform, but they were able to perform now. And I think that'll bode well for them moving forward. Sorry,
I
I
think
forgot the Y at the end of their name.
that's
Typo
okay.
on my
That's all
part.
right. But
Why not Elwood?
learning how to win should be in the dictionary next to this storybook run of Elwood City, because they're learning how to win, and man, are they doing it in a great fashion.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So our WPIAL Blitz player of the week this week is quarterback Kymone Brown from Jeanette, who had just an absolutely outstanding game, 500 yards of total offense in their win over Brentwood. Contemplate that for a second. 500 yards of total offense, 6 total touchdowns, and scored that game-winning 2-point conversion for Jeanette to beat Brentwood. So he is our player of the week, and we've got some highlights here to share as well, thanks to his huddle page. So here we go. Here he is, just slicing and dicing his way through the Brentwood defense.
And good recognition there too. Having his head looking downfield, he could have taken off and run on that last play, but he did. Now here he's probably going to take off.
Yep. This was a compilation of highlights. So this was another game, but you can still see the skill that he has. And this is another Brentwood one. He put together a compilation film, so didn't have a just Brentwood one. But look at the arm here to just hit a guy right on the money in stride down the field. Yep, great stuff. We also had 2 other players score 6 touchdowns this week. So in keeping with my tradition of me saying, if you score 6 touchdowns, I will show your highlights. Guess who did it? Matt Seg did it against Bishop Canavan. Fort Cherry, getting that big win over Canavan that we talked about, but we haven't really shown Matt Seg highlights this year. And he went out in their biggest game of the year and against, the team that was expected to and really did challenge them for the conference title, goes out and gets 6 touchdowns. That was the game sealer right there. Actually, I want to go back to that play for a second, because this play to me encapsulates everything that Fort Cherry does really good on offense. So it's not just that Matt Seg is an incredible athlete, but watch the running back in the backfield here and the lead block that he throws on the safety to seal this off and give Matt Seg the path he needs to get to the end zone, right? Fort Cherry,
there's not a lot of room out there either.
No, Fort Cherry does so much of the little things. So Seg's obviously got the ball, but watch the running back come out, seal off this safety right there, and give him the path that he needs to get to the end zone. Like Fort Cherry's receivers, their running backs, whoever it is, they all do all these little things that are necessary just to help a team be successful. And it's watching them week in and week out, anytime you see them play, yes, they have, a 4-star talent in Matt Seg, who's got D1 offers from pretty much every school, who can make throws like that on the run and, has incredible speed. But the selflessness of everyone on their team to go out and do whatever's
Do their
necessary to
job.
do their job to make the offense be successful is really cool to watch, and I think is part of the reason why they're such a successful team overall, because it's not just Matt Seg being an incredible athlete, it's everybody pitching in.
And I like to point those things out when I'm making a broadcast as well, when we have like slow motion instant replays of games. I mean, I pointed it out a couple of weeks ago when I did a Twin Valley game, the fact that it was 42-0, but I pointed out the fact that the quarterback was still going through, after he handed the ball off, just the progression of his fakes, okay? That he was still doing everything that he should be doing, that whether it's nothing or 42-0, the type of fakes, the type of the mechanics that he was doing was still top notch, and that goes so far in the long term in making a team successful.
Absolutely. And one other one, Minaj Lucas from Highlands. He had 3 rushing and 3 passing touchdowns in this game.
My.
So he had been our player of the week before, but Highlands just absolutely smoked Burrow. I think it was 61-0. But keeping with my tradition, if you put up 6 touchdowns, I will show your highlights. So we get more Minaj Lucas highlights this year. I think this was the second or third time this year he's had a 6-touchdown game, which is just incredible.
Well, the offensive line should get some kind of an award, because that's been a clean pocket each time that he's thrown the football. That's for sure.
Yep. And not only a clean pocket to throw from, but when he decides to tuck it and run,
yeah.
the
Kind of
amount
a
of
hole
space
there
that he has and the athleticism in space is really, really impressive. So overall,
Wow.
congratulations to all of our players of the week this week. Kymon Brown from Jeanette being the overall player of the week after putting up 500 total yards and 6 touchdowns. I mean, not only putting up 6 touchdowns, but 500 yards of total offense is just incredible. Matt Seg with his 6 touchdowns, Minaj Lucas, his 6 touchdowns, Gabe Jenkins from Amani Christian in their showdown with Deer Lakes for the conference title. Put up 256 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns and added a receiving touchdown. Nico Morrow from Trinity, they had a big game against Chartiers Valley that was pretty much a playoff elimination game, ran for 353 and 5 touchdowns, was pretty much unstoppable. Khalil Johnson from Cornell, this kid did everything this week. So he threw a passing touchdown. He ran for 90 yards and a touchdown. He had 134 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. So 4 total touchdowns plus forced 2 fumbles on defense. Like, just all around great game for Cornell as they beat Rochester. And then Cody Mullen from Knock also put up almost 500 total yards, just shy of that, 249 passing, 246 rushing, and 3 passing touchdowns for Knock. So some incredible performances this week around the WPIAL.
And I want to take a moment to just to remind everybody, we do the show live on YouTube, so that if anybody's got questions out there, you can put it in the chat. Don't hesitate to questions, comments, complaints, whatever. If we forgot something, like I forgot to show something in my Fresh Set of Down show we did earlier. So that's what it's there for. Please use it. We love everybody's input. Don't we, Ian?
We do, absolutely. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, we're going to start running through some playoff scenarios and stuff here. So if anybody's got any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We love to hear from our fans. We really appreciate everyone. So yeah, actually I should post the link on Twitter too. But yes, yeah, we definitely love it if people, want to ask questions of us. And there's a lot of questions to be asked here as we kind of head into the penultimate week of the regular season.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about our winning streaks overall here. The number of 8-0 teams, now has diminished a little bit of the teams that were 7-0 entering last week. There are a few teams still that are 7-0 that either didn't play a week 0 game or had a game canceled because of weather earlier this year. But none of the teams from last year have an overall winning streak because our 2 state champion teams lost earlier this year. Fort Cherry did get their 22nd straight win against WPIAL opponents, but they obviously lost in the state title game last year. But nevertheless, still continuing on with winning streaks. So we had several matchups of 7-0 versus 7-0 teams. Upper St. Clair beating Bethel Park, and then Clairton beating Leechburg last week. And on the flip side, on the losing streak side, Beth Center actually last night on Monday night beat Mapletown, and that game was just I mean, it was just like, what else could go? It was, like, what else could go wrong for this game? It was supposed to be Friday night, but they couldn't find enough officials to be able to ref the game, so they had to push it to Saturday. And then something happened Saturday that couldn't work, so they had to push it to Monday. And then the lights at the stadium wouldn't work, so they had to move it from Mapletown over to Carmichael's, like the neighboring high school down there in Greene County. So it was just like
Wow.
one thing after another happened, and Best Center wound up coming off with the victory and ending their 9-game losing streak.
Things happen for a reason.
Yeah, yeah, I guess so. But it was just, that whatever could go wrong did go wrong. Okay, on the conference game side of things, the longest active winning and losing streaks all continued. So, congratulations to Aliquippa, Avonworth, and Neshannock that continued their conference winning streaks. Neshannock got a bit of a scare from a good Southside team. On the losing streak side, no one was close. Ringgold's game against Thomas Jefferson was postponed because there was allegations of hazing into the Ringgold program, but so they postponed their game against TJ, did the investigation, nothing. They basically issued a statement that said they didn't really turn up anything. So they're resuming football activities this week, but TJ's really good and Ringgold's not very good, so they probably would have
Yeah.
lost that game anyways. But
Yeah. Delayed the inevitable.
yeah. Yeah, I'm guessing they're not going to make that game up. If I had to be a betting man, I would say they're not going to make that game up. So, all right. So let's talk about conference playoff qualification, and let's look at where teams are heading into the postseason here. So in 6A, the top 4 teams make the playoffs. In 5A, 3A, 2A, 1A, the top 3 teams in every conference are guaranteed to make the playoffs. And then there's at-large wild cards in 4A. There's a more limited playoff field, so only 8 teams in total qualify. So just 2 from each conference plus 2 wild cards. So we'll take a look at each classification here. But just as a quick reminder for someone who may be tuning into the show for the first time of how the WPIAL standings work, it's by conference record first, then head-to-head results if teams are tied, and then Gardner points, which is a strength of victory metric, and then tiebreaker points, which is a margin of victory metric. So let's look at Quad A. Central Catholic and North Allegheny have clinched their playoff spots. Central can clinch the conference title this week if they get a victory over Seneca Valley. Seneca Valley's win over Hempfield put them in pretty good position to make the playoffs. Have not guaranteed a spot yet, but could clinch this week. Hempfield still right there in the mix in the middle, but don't sleep on Mount Lebanon. So this Hempfield Mount Lebanon game is a really big game for the postseason because this will be Hempfield's last conference game, and if Mount Lebanon beats them, we could wind up in a situation, especially if Canon Mac beats Norwin also, you could wind up in a situation where Hempfield, Canon Mac, and Mount Lebanon, are more or less in a 3-way tie against each other. And then Mount Lebanon's got Norwin next week, who's in last place. So if Lebo wins out, they'll make the playoffs, which is kind of wild to think about considering they're only sitting at 1-7 this year. But they've played better the last few weeks. They only lost to North Allegheny by 7. They beat Seneca Valley like 32-8. And they played a tight game against a good 5A Penn Hills team last week. They lost, but it was a non-conference game. But still, like, Mount Lebanon's a team that had a lot of turnover. Had some new guys they were working into their roster, but they've found something with their quarterback Patrick Smith as kind of a dual threat now, and they're
New
playing
coach.
better.
I mean,
New
right?
coach, yeah. So they've been playing better like the last 3 or 4 weeks. So don't be shocked if Mount Lebanon beats Hempfield this week, they're probably going to make the playoffs unless something weird happens with tiebreakers. But yeah, they've got an opportunity here to go on a bit of a run versus a team like Cannon Mac who has Central Catholic next week and might have to win 2 to make it, or they at least have to beat Norwin to have a chance this week. But the tiebreakers aren't set up real well for Cannon Mac.
And I'm really interested, just in, even though it's a non-league game, that Pine Richland North Allegheny is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean that's a connect the dots game. It isn't a league game.
that's an absolute headline. I mean, rival schools, arguably, the top team in 5A against one of the top teams in 6A. And yeah, that's absolutely a headliner game. It's actually the game that our friends over at KDK Radio will be broadcasting this week. So,
good.
Yeah, that's definitely a game to keep an eye on as well. Because Pine Richland already beat Central Catholic. So, you could make the case that Pine Richland
There's your
might
Quad
be
County champion. Oh, but they're
yeah.
not in the Quad County.
they're a 5A team that could probably win 6A this year.
Yep.
Actually, there's a couple 5A teams I think could win 6A. I think Upper St. Clair could win 6A this year too. But nevertheless, so let's talk about 5A. Upper St. Clair got that win over Bethel Park this past week. They've now run through 3 straight undefeated teams. They beat Peters, they beat South Fayette, they beat Bethel Park. So Upper St. Clair's clinched a playoff spot, can clinch a conference title this week with a win over Moon, and they're just rolling right now, kind of like what we talked about with Woodland Hills. They missed the playoffs last year because of those tiebreakers, and now they're just cruising past everyone. Won some gritty games though. I mean, they beat Peters Township by 10. They beat South Fayette by 10. They beat Bethel on a last minute touchdown pass. So those are all really good, really close teams together from a quality standpoint. So I would not be surprised to see any of them make a run. And then, Moon can probably work their way into the playoffs, I think, with one of the wild cards. But they played some tight games the last couple of weeks as well. Finally got a win over Baldwin, but they played Peters tough and they played Bethel tough before that. So Moon's a good team that just has lost some close games. So don't sleep on Moon when it comes to playoff time. In the Big East Conference, we interviewed Coach Tarrant from Woodland Hills earlier in the show. Woodland Hills now, has the clear path to the conference title. They win this week. They clinch the conference title, considering they've already beat Penn Trafford. But, sitting there 4-0 overall in the conference, things already lined up very well. Have clinched a playoff spot, can clinch the conference title. Woodland Hills is really good. Penn Trafford and Franklin Regional sitting there in pretty good position. Both of them have opportunities through different scenarios to lock up playoff spots this week. And then, the other teams are all kind of fighting for the wild card. Latrobe started off the season really good, but lost their best player, Alex Tash, to a shoulder injury. So he's out for the year. So that'll be interesting to kind of see how the WPIAL weights that. And I think the really interesting thing to me is, how the WPIAL is going to weight where teams finish in their conference for potential wild card consideration. Would they take a team like a Latrobe that is further down in the conference standings than a team like, Kiski or Gateway? Latrobe has a better overall record, but, if Latrobe loses to Kiski and Gateway, then, it's hard to argue. Yeah.
Let's just say, let's hope not.
Right. Yeah. Yep. No, I agree with you. I mean, I think if someone beats you head to head, that's a good case to take the other team. But it's one of those kind of interesting scenarios where some teams had harder non-conference schedules and things like that. And you know what? Don't sleep on this Gateway team either. They started off the season or were working in some new starts. Coach Tarrant even talked about, like, they've got a freshman playing quarterback. Gateway's been playing some really good ball the last couple of weeks, and they had to take their lumps early in the season, but they've come on lately. So don't sleep on Gateway there, even though their record might not say they're as good as some of these other teams. In the Northeast Conference, Pine Richland actually has a scenario in play this week that they could clinch the conference title even though they play a non-conference game. So they've clinched a playoff spot for now, but still, actually, I think they. No, yeah. So whatever. They have a scenario where they could clinch the conference title this week, even though they play a non-conference game. North Hills, Penn Hills. This is a big one. But kind of regardless of what happens in this game, Plum is still not out of it yet. Because Plum plays Penn Hills next week. So even if Penn Hills beats North Hills, Plum could work their way in to the playoff race if they're able to beat Penn Hills next week. So this is a big game. North Hills is playing really, really good. Their defense has been outstanding this year. Penn Hills' offense has come on a lot lately. They started the season 0-3, but have gone 4-1 since then, just won a shootout against Mount Lebanon. So Penn Hills is playing really good. North Hills is playing really good. This is going to be a really fun matchup.
Yeah, and Penn Hills, I mean, I'm just kind of looking at their stats there. They lost to Pine Richland, they lost to North Allegheny, they lost to Woodland Hills.
Mm-hmm.
Our buddies at Susquehanna Township, who's a big time 4A program out here, and then a good win last week against Mount Lebo. That might be the team that is going to give the committee heartburn on what they do with it is Penn Hills, I think.
Yeah, well, and we had Penn Hills' coach on earlier this year, and he even talked about, trying to work in some new starters. And, anytime you graduate a player that was a 4-year starter for you at quarterback, like that makes a huge difference of trying to retool your offense and just kind of figure things out and figure out roles and players and things like that. So
Sure.
it's gonna be interesting to see kind of as we go into the playoffs. And you liked these slides last week, so I brought them back this week of kind of looking at the potential playoff races. So the teams in bold are ones that have clinched playoff spots so far. So, we've got Upper St. Clair, Woodland Hills, and Pine Richland have clinched. I think Peters, Bethel are definitely in, even though they haven't formally clinched yet, but there's no way they're going to not get a wild card, even if they don't finish in the top 3. Kind of the same for, Penn Trafford, Franklin Regional. North Hills, I think, will definitely get a wild card, even if they don't finish in the top 3 somehow through some weird tiebreaker. But then, the 3 wild cards, you're looking at South Fayette had a really good non-conference performance. Moon is a really strong team that's played Peters and Bethel to tight games. Gateway's come on lately. Kiski has that win over Latrobe, and Plum still has a chance if they can beat Penn Hills next week to kind of work their way into things as well. So 3 out of those teams are going to make it. I would say I feel pretty confident about South Fayette qualifying. But we'll see, just because South Fayette did play some tight games. They played Upper St. Clair to a 10-point game. They performed really well in non-conference play. But out of those other teams, pick 2 and we'll see who makes it.
Out of all of those, and the reason I like the slide is it gives you a perspective on the teams that A might make a wild card, and B, any of these wild card teams that might make a run. Well, South Fayette might make a run. I mean, they've proven that that they're a good team. Obviously, 6-2 overall record. Beyond that, I think that it's like,
I'm telling you, don't sleep on Moon. Don't
I
sleep
know
on Moon.
you keep saying that. All right, I won't keep. But I mean, are they? So what you're saying then is you think Moon has an opportunity to win a playoff game?
Yes.
Okay.
I think if they get the right matchup, they have an opportunity to win a playoff.
That's a tall order. Are you kidding me? Against Upper St. Clair, Woodland Hills, or Pine Richland?
Well, no, because remember, here's the thing, right? So there's only 12 playoff teams, so the top 4 seeds get buys.
Okay,
so,
I take that
teams
back.
That get in,
sure.
So
they're playing seeds 5 through, whatever.
5 through 8.
Got it.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
they'd be looking at like they played Penn Trafford earlier this year and only lost by 7. So then you're looking at like a Penn Trafford, a North Hills, a Franklin Regional, maybe Bethel Park. So that's what they probably wouldn't match me against Bethel because that's a conference opponent. So that's why I'm saying like, if they get a Penn Trafford, North Hills, Franklin Regional kind of team, like I wouldn't be shocked if Moon can win a game. I'm not saying Moon's making the semifinals. I'm not saying they're knocking off one of those top
I
seeds.
have written that down.
Yeah. I'm saying those first round games where you've got the top 4 seeds having buys. And let's talk about that too, because I think Upper St. Clair, Pine Richland, Woodland Hills, and Peters Township right now are the teams in line for the buys. Now Peters got to play Bethel. So I think the winner of that Peters Township Bethel Park game is gonna get a bye because they'll be have only one loss. They'll be whatever, be 8-1, 9-1 overall. But I think the question that Coach Tarrant alluded to earlier when we interviewed him was, because the WPIAL is going to seed these teams, right? Let's just say, who's the number 1 seed between Upper St. Clair and Pine Richland is going to be a really interesting scenario because if Pine Richland has wins on their slate over both Central Catholic and North Allegheny, you're going to have a really hard time saying Pine Richland isn't the number 1 overall seed.
Well, look, I
But
have one question. The question that I have
yeah,
is, in the seeding process,
mm-hmm.
are the winners of the conference the only ones that are guaranteed, like, number 1 seeds?
No.
So does that mean that, all right, so it goes Upper St. Clair, Woodland Hills, Pine Richland, and then, depending on record, or depending on Gardner points or whatever like that,
No,
they're going to
it's
see, right, it's going to be the committee decide
right.
how it goes. And
Yes.
that's what Coach Tarrant was alluding to, I think,
Yes, it
is
was.
that, all right, well, they can take more of the Northeast Conference than than they
Mm-hmm.
can, the Big East, and then they end up like having to go through like a gauntlet of like maybe Woodland Hills and Upper St. Clair rather than, maybe Peters Township or Penn Trafford. I mean,
Yeah. Well, and I think also the other thing is that conference champions are not guaranteed buys. And I think that's what he was getting at too, that you know, if the committee so decided, and I'm not saying they're going to do this, but I'm saying hypothetically, right? If the committee decided to give, Upper St. Clair, Pine Richland, Peters Township, and North Hills the top 4 seeds and give them buys, Woodland Hills as a conference champion could have to play in that 5-12 first round game and not get a bye. I don't think they're going to do that. I think it's going to be the 3 champions plus Peters, or whoever wins the Peters Bethel game, I should say. But I'm just, hypothetically, the committee could do that. And they have done things like that in the past in other classifications where they gave a second place team in a conference a bye over a first place team in another conference. So that has happened before.
okay.
But we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see when the brackets come out. But that's like I said, it's happened before, so we'll see. All right, on to 4A. So the important thing to remember here in 4A is that only the top 2 teams in each conference are guaranteed playoff spots. There are 2 wild card spots, but it's a razor thin margin in 4A to kind of figure out where everything's going to fall. So Thomas Jefferson has kind of run away with things. They didn't play this week because their game against Ringgold was postponed. We talked about that already, but they've already got wins over Bell Vernon and Trinity as well, who are the other teams kind of in the running. So TJ can pretty much lock things up for the conference title this week if they beat Char Valley. This Laurel Highlands Trinity game is, I'll say, pretty much a playoff elimination game there. Trinity needs to win, especially because Trinity plays Bell Vernon next week, which would which would set up
Yeah,
a
that's a
game,
loss.
basically for the, for the second spot in the conference. So that's the one, this week is kind of the prelude to next week in the Big Six, where Trinity against Bell Vernon will be for that second guaranteed playoff spot. In the Greater Allegheny Conference, McKeesport got a big win over Mars that set themselves up to, basically be able to walk to the conference title here. Mars already has a win over Knock and West Mifflin, who are kind of the other close contenders for that second place spot. So I think West Mifflin and Mars are the top two here. Considering that nobody in this conference has a winning record overall, I think it's going to be really tough for the third place team in this conference to get a wild card. But the winner of Knock West Mifflin this week will probably be the team that finishes third. So that's a game for third place, but I would be surprised if they got a wild card, but you never know. I think McKeesport and Mars are going to be the only two playoff teams to come out of here. That said, McKeesport had an absolutely brutal non-conference schedule. So don't sleep on McKeesport making some noise once we get to the playoffs, because they've started clicking a little bit on offense, and they're better than their record is at 4-4 because of how tough of a non-conference slate
Right.
they
They're
have.
basically they're reinventing themselves for the postseason.
Yeah. Yep. And then in the Parkway Conference, where we have this absolutely massive showdown this week between Aliquippa and Montour. These two teams were both semifinalists last year. Aliquippa, is the defending WPIAL three-time defending WPIAL champions, defending state champions, all that. Montour has been really, really good this year and has just been lighting everyone up. And Montour's quarterback threw for 4 touchdown passes in the first quarter last week against Amberts, then didn't play the other 3 quarters. So Montour's starters are going to be very well rested for this game. I think Aliquippa rested their starters in the second half against Blackhawk as well. So this is going to be a really good showdown for not only the conference title here, but I think for the number 1 overall seed in 4A, because I think both of these teams are the two that are going to make going to be guaranteed to make the playoffs. I think West Allegheny might be able to sneak their way into the playoffs as well, especially if they beat Blackhawk this week and they've got a game against Montour next week. That would be, depending on what happens with Montour and Aliquippa, could be for a guaranteed playoff spot. But Montour's really good. This is going to be a heck of a game between Montour and Aliquippa.
It has reverberations statewide, quite honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and oops, I didn't do a slide for 4A just because there's only 2 guaranteed playoff
Yeah.
spots in 4A. We don't have quite enough of a playoff picture yet to start to show that, but
No
really
worries.
we're looking at Aliquippa. I think Aliquippa and Montour are going to get in regardless of how they finish. McKeesport's going to get in. I think Mars gets in as the second team here. TJ gets in. I think Bell Vernon eventually will be, the second place team here. But then the wild cards start to get interesting because you've got a Trinity team that's sitting there at 3-5. That's probably the third best team in the Big Six. Knock and West Mifflin play this week. The winner of that game will have 4 wins, but it's kind of sitting there in the middle of the pack. And then the Parkway, West Allegheny had their first 2 games this year canceled because of weather. So they've only played 5 games this year and still have to play Montour, and got smoked, or not smoked. They got beat 19-7 by Aliquippa a couple of weeks ago. Aliquippa controlled the game, but it wasn't as close as the score was. But nevertheless, I really think West Allegheny not only needs to beat Blackhawk this week, but probably needs a good showing against Montour next week if they want to be considered for that last wild card spot. So the wild card is going to get interesting just because of the difficult non-conference schedules that a lot of these teams played. In 3A, Amani Christian absolutely annihilated Deer Lakes 42-0 this past week and have asserted themselves not only as the top team in the Allegheny 7 conference, but maybe the top team overall in 3A. I mean, I think Avonworth is a really good team. I still think Central Valley is a quality team. I think Elizabeth Forward's a quality team. But what Imani Christian's been able to do this year has been just outstanding. And for a 1A size school that opted to play up in 3A, they have certainly delivered on, being able to compete at the 3A level. So they've clinched a playoff spot. They'll have an opportunity to clinch the conference title this week as well. Deer Lakes, Freeport, both have wins over Highlands, and Freeport has a win over Burrell. So both of those should be the other teams to make the playoffs in a guaranteed spot out of here. So the top three in 3A are guaranteed playoff spots, and then it's open for the wild cards. But Highlands just annihilated Burrell this week. That was that 61-0 game. So
Yep.
I think Burrell's going to fall down the standings. Burrell's still just sitting there because they're only 2-2 as opposed to Highlands 2-3. But I think Highlands will eventually be the fourth place team here, and I think Highlands probably has done enough to prove they're worthy of consideration for one of those three wild card spots overall. So I think Highlands will be in the running for a wild card. In the Interstate Conference, we have a showdown for first place this week between Southmoreland and Elizabeth Forward. So these two teams have, separated themselves from the pack. Southmoreland got a very nice victory over their arch rivals, Mount Pleasant, this week. Elizabeth Forward, despite being in second place because of Gardner points, has actually clinched a playoff spot because of the other teams they've beaten with head-to-head wins. Overall, I think the top three here pretty much are going to be the top three in some order. The winner of Southmoreland, Elizabeth Forward, will win the conference title. And then Elizabeth Forward does still have to play Mount Pleasant next week. But I think Greensburg-Salem, now with that win over Derry last week, if they can beat York this week, will put themselves in a pretty strong position to be considered for a wild card, because that'll give them 6 overall wins. Even if they lose to Southmoreland next week, they'd be sitting at 6-4 overall. I think Greensburg-Salem's going to get some strong consideration for the wild card if they can beat York this week.
Yes, I would say so at 5-3.
Yeah. But the Southmoreland Elizabeth Forward game is definitely the one to watch in 3A this week. Southmoreland's been able to throw the ball all over the yard this year. Their quarterback, Anthony Smith's been really good. Elizabeth Forward's got Ryan Messina at quarterback, Charlie Nagood at running back, who does a little bit of everything. And they have a two-way lineman, Chris Climbs, who's absolutely outstanding. He's got some D1 offers. So it's going to be a really good matchup here between Southmoreland and Elizabeth Forward. In the Western Hills Conference, Avonworth has separated themselves at the top. They've got a win over Central Valley. They do still have to play Beaver next week, which, potentially could throw things into a bit of chaos in a 3-way tie if Beaver's able to beat Avonworth. But nevertheless, there's some 3 really good teams here. Avonworth is good. Central Valley, after their rough start to the season, has turned things around lately, and Beaver's a very, very strong team. So I will note, though, this North Catholic Avonworth game is a matchup of 3A teams now, but back a decade ago, they were arch rivals in 1A that were competing for conference titles and WPIAL titles. North Catholic won the 2013 single A title, and then Avonworth came back and beat them in the playoffs the following year, made it to the 2014 title game, lost to Clairton, but nevertheless, these are teams that have some history with each other, going back a decade plus to when they were both single A teams. And don't sleep on Hopewell's potential to kind of work their way into the wild card conversation here. They're sitting at 4-4 overall. The Hopewell North Catholic game is going to be a really big game next week for wild card considerations. So overall in 3A, Imani Christian and Elizabeth Forward have clinched playoff spots. I think those top 3 from each of those 3 conferences are going to be the ones that get the guaranteed spots. So the real question starts to come in about these wild cards is, Greensburg-Salem's sitting there at 5-3 overall. Hopewell and North Catholic play each other next week. Highlands, has
it sounds like they got to take somebody.
Yeah. So they're gonna. I mean, three of these teams are gonna make it. So, I put Derry on the list at 3 just because they have 3 wins overall, and I had other 3-win teams on here. But I think if Greensburg-Salem has a win over Derry, so I have a hard time seeing Derry working their way in. Burrell's got to play some good teams still, so I think they're gonna fade out as time goes on. But I think the Hopewell North Catholic game's definitely going to decide a wild card spot, and then it'll probably come down to the loser of that against Highlands for who gets in to that final wild card spot in 3A, which is definitely going to present an interesting decision for the committee, because it's going to start to look at how much do you weight non-conference games and
Sure.
non-conference victories and all that.
And whether or not, they're at above or below classification that they're in.
Mm-hmm. Right, because Highlands is sitting there at 3-4 overall, but they had a game against Newcastle that got postponed because of weather. They lost by 1 point in overtime to Armstrong, who's a 4A team. And then they beat Elizabeth Forward in triple overtime. So if Elizabeth Forward wins the interstate conference and you're looking at Highlands as a potential wildcard team, you say, okay, they beat the conference champion from the interstate conference. They might, that might be enough to get them in over a Hopewell or a North Catholic.
I would agree with you with that. Something's got to vault somebody forward there.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, triple overtime win over Elizabeth Forward might be enough, especially since, you look at who Hopewell played. Their one, non-conference victory was over Riverside, who's a 2A school. It's whereas Highlands beat a 3A team that's going to be a playoff team, and North Catholic, their non-conference win was over Blackhawk, who's a 4A team, but kind of a middle of the road 4A team. So, yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how they kind of weight these decisions and decide who potentially gets that last wild card spot.
Yeah, tough in 3A.
It is. All right. In 2A, in the Allegheny Conference, South Park and South Allegheny have clinched playoff spots. What a year for South Allegheny, man. I mean, remember we talked about them back on the season preview show, and I love John from PA Today Sports, and I think I said, watch out for South Allegheny. I think they can kind of work their way in and be competitive this year. And he was kind of like, really? I don't know. They went 1-9 last year. We'll see, maybe. And I will, I'll be honest about my opinion too. I said I think they could be in the running for a wild card because I thought like South Park, Steel Valley, and Ulsh were going to be the top three teams here. But South Allegheny went out and beat Ulsh, and they've clinched a playoff spot. So they've even outperformed my expectations for them, which is great. I love to see teams outperform my expectations. So congrats to South Allegheny. What a great year for them so far. But they do have to play Steel Valley next week. So that's going to be a tough matchup, but also kind of a good measuring stick game for the Gladiators. Steel Valley's kind of flown under the radar here. They're really starting to hit on all cylinders now. After a kind of up and down start to the season, both Barksdale brothers are fully healthy. So we're finally seeing the Steel Valley offense as we had all hoped to see it over the last few years with both Donald and Duran Barksdale. And that their loss to South Park was a 7-0 game, and that was one of the first games back for Duran. They were still kind of working him into the offense. So don't sleep on Steel Valley to make a bit of a run in 2A. I know they were one of the preseason favorites, so that's to be like a surprise to anyone that I'm saying don't sleep on Steel Valley. But I think they're definitely right in the mix too, with these other teams. And South Park is really, really good. South Park has a team that could win the 2A title.
Wow.
In the Century Conference, Seton LaSalle has clinched a playoff spot. They play their crossroad rivals, Keystone Oaks. They're literally like on both sides of McNeely Road, like their campuses face each other. So see, they play each other this week in a good South Hills rivalry game. And for the top spot in the conference, Seton's already clinched a playoff spot, but could well, I guess they couldn't quite wrap up the conference though, because they have to play Washington next week. But Seton, well, I guess if Washington loses and Seton wins, they would clinch. But at any rate, Seton's got a really good team too. I think the committee's going to have a really interesting decision to make in 2A between Seton, LaSalle, and South Park for who gets the overall #1 seed. But nevertheless, this conference kind of got interesting too because Keystone Oaks just went out and beat Waynesburg last week, and Waynesburg had beaten Washington earlier this year, and Washington had beaten KO. So, if everything plays out, we could wind up in a situation where we have a three-way tie for second place here, which makes it a good thing that there are wild cards available in 2A because only the top three are guaranteed playoff spots. But I think whoever finishes fourth here probably does get in. And Carlinton has the longest playoff drought of any team in the WPIAL, but they're sitting there at 4-4 overall. If they can stack another win or two, they might be able to earn consideration for a wild card spot. I think they're definitely better than Charleroi, who they'll play next week. But Carlinton could work their way into consideration for a playoff spot, which is a really cool story to watch considering they haven't made the playoffs in I think 2001 was there 23 years. Yeah, it's been a long
I
time.
love the way that you phrase that. They could possibly work their way into a playoff spot, not like they're in it or are going to win a game. It's
Well, I mean,
so,
hey, it's we talk a lot about building success,
right,
right? If
correct,
you haven't made the
exactly.
playoffs since 2001,
So
if the
this
WPIAL
would
gives
be.
you if the WPIAL gives you a wild card, you're not going to say no thanks. We want to earn our spot. You're going to say
I
we will
would.
absolutely take this wild card spot and go play a playoff game.
I don't disagree with that, but that was far kind of a not quite the total.
It wasn't a full of confidence statement. It
Yeah,
was a
correct.
but
It was
with
just something that, hey, by the way, let's just keep an eye on that.
yeah, but with four wild cards in 2A, the top three teams are guaranteed spots, and then there's four wild cards. So it kind of becomes okay, well, who's gonna get those four wild card spots? We'll talk about that in a minute here, but let's talk about Elwood City first. Elwood City's clinched a playoff spot, so congratulations to the Wolverines. Have a clear path here that if they beat Union this week, they'll be conference champions for the first time since 1997. So congrats to Elwood City on a great season so far. Western Beaver got a win over Mohawk to pretty much solidify their second place spot in this conference. And then, kind of a mixed bag in the middle of the pack here.
Yeah.
Riverside and Mohawk are going to play each other next week for the third and final guaranteed playoff spot. But then, a lot of other potential for for wild card spots. So let's talk about these wild cards though, right? That you've got the top three in each conference, but then you know Mohawk, Riverside, they're going to play each other. So one of those teams will finish third, one will be in the running for a wild card. Waynesburg, like I mentioned, has that win over Washington, might be enough
What
to
a
get them.
mosh pit.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So you got to pick four of these teams, which is why I was saying, Carlinton, it wasn't a full of confidence statement, but I was like, Carlinton sitting there at 4-4 might be able to kind of work their way into things just because of, looking at the other teams, and they got to
Yeah,
pick
but at
four.
1-3, won't they be shy Gardner points?
Gardner points don't matter for the wild card though.
Okay.
It's only the top three guaranteed spots. After that, the WPIAL can pick
See,
whoever they
that?
want.
Well, yeah, but that's not meaning to say that the committee won't take into account Gardner points in their
Right.
selection.
Right. That is true. Yes. Yeah. And to go back to that conference for a second, oops, there they are. They still have to play Charleroi, so they can get to probably 2-4 in conference play because I don't think Carlinton will beat Washington this week. So if they get to 2-4, they'll put them at 5-5 overall. So okay, we're gonna say all right, the top four here are getting in, the top three plus a wild card. So all right, Carlinton's sitting at 5-5 overall. Then compare that to I think the top four here get in, but New Brighton, they've got to play Western Beaver this week. Western Beaver's pretty good. So let's say New Brighton loses that one, but then New Brighton against Union next week could go either way. New Brighton maybe gets to 5-5. And then all of a sudden you're comparing, all right, we've got a 5-5 New Brighton team against the 5-5 Carleton team for that last playoff spot. It's going to be
Yeah,
a
right.
hard
It's
choice, right?
messy.
It gets real messy, and especially in the other conference now. Um, even if you take Ulsh, put Ulsh in the playoffs as the fourth place team, then you're down to Ligonier Valley, um, who's probably going to finish with a losing record. Shady Side, who's going to finish with a losing record. So really, you're looking at those 5-5 teams, right? The Carleton against New Brighton, maybe for that last playoff spot. So there's still a lot to be decided, a lot to play out. But
Sure.
there's
It's going to
yeah,
be interesting
it's
to say the
possible.
least.
It's possible that Carleton breaks their playoff drought, is what I'm saying. It's possible. All right, in 1A, Neshannock clinched a playoff spot with their win over Southside Beaver this past week. Laurel, what a story this is at Laurel. Laurel started the year 0-4 and then got into conference play and rattled off 4 straight wins and is now like on the cusp of making the playoffs. So what a
Wow.
great turnaround story for them this year. And that's, those situations where you go 0-4 in conference play, like you could just pack it in for the year and be like, oh, not our year, not going to happen. But Laurel gritted out some tough victories and now it's started to play really well in conference play and are right in the mix that they've got games left against Southside and Neshannock. If they can somehow pull off those games, I don't think they will, but if they could somehow pull off those games, they could be conference champions. So
Yeah.
Laurel's got everything in front of them still to play for. Southside and Laurel, Laurel's got to play Neshannock next week, but I think those will be the 3 playoff teams out of this conference. In the Black Hills Conference, Fort Cherry's not only clinched a playoff spot, but we're the first team in the WPIAL to clinch a conference title. So congratulations to Fort Cherry after they beat Bishop Canavan. And Canavan's got to turn around now and play Monessen this week, who's also a good team. So Canavan's kind of got to run through the ringer of good teams here with Fort Cherry and Monessen back to back. And then Monessen, for their part, has to play Canavan this week and Cornell next week to kind of determine who finishes in that third guaranteed playoff spot. But I think considering the overall records here and what these teams did in non-conference play, regardless of how those play out, the top 4 here are going to make the playoffs. So the fourth place team here is definitely going to get a wild card. So Fort Cherry, Canavan, Monessen, Cornell, they're all definitely going to make the playoffs. I don't think there's any question about that.
Yeah,
and I would not be surprised to see all 4 of those teams win first round playoff games and at least get to the quarterfinals. Those are 4 really, really good squads.
Yeah, I mean, Monessen in my top 5 there, but boy, I tell you, Canavan and Cornell right on the cusp.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. In the Eastern Conference, Clairton did give up points this week, but still handled Leechburg and was able to enact the mercy rule there. Leechburg will play Greensburg Central Catholic next week for essentially the second place spot in the conference, assuming they beat Brentwood this week. Jeanette with that big come from behind victory over Brentwood to put themselves in position here. If Jeanette wins out against a couple of the other bottom teams in the conference, Jeanette will most likely have the opportunity to finish 4th here. I think we could see a few wild cards coming out of here because the top 3 I think are pretty much guaranteed to get in between GCC, Clairton, and Leechburg. But then I could see both Jeanette and Brentwood earning wild card spots out of this conference, just because they've got to take 4 wild cards. They've got to come from somewhere. And especially after how close of a game the 2 of them played, I could see both of them getting in.
Okay.
And finally, in the Tri-County South, we're on a collision course with California and Jefferson Morgan to play for the conference title next week in week 9. West Green can lock up the 3rd guaranteed playoff spot if they're able to beat Carmichael's this week. And West Green, a team that, didn't perform very well in non-conference play, but have won 3 conference games so far. If they win a 4th one, that'll be enough to get them into the playoffs. And I think the real question in the Tri-County South is, will the fourth place team earn a wild card, or will the WPIAL award the 4 wild card spots to other conferences, considering how the Tri-County South has traditionally performed in the playoffs? So that's definitely a storyline to watch as we head towards the selection of playoff teams, but the top 3 are guaranteed, and West Green, with their wins over Bentworth and Avella, and if they can beat Carmichael's this week, have a shot to be, the guaranteed third place team. So the 1A playoff race overall, the top 3 in each conference are guaranteed spots, but then picking 4 wild cards, like we said, I think Cornell's definitely going to get in. I think
Wow,
Brentwood and Jeanette both get in, but then after that, there's a pretty steep and pretty quick drop off before you start to get to some of those other teams in contention for that final wild card spot. So looking at those teams might have to start to take into some consideration, non-conference play, who teams played, who they beat, all that other stuff. It's whoever gets the last playoff spot in 1A. It's going to be a very interesting decision
They'll
for
have
the
earned
committee
it.
to make. Yeah.
They'll
Yes.
have earned it.
Yes, it will be it will be an interesting decision for the committee to make. I will put it that way. All right. So that brings us to our games of the week for this week. We talked about all of these. Mount Lebanon against Hempfield, a big game in the 6A playoff race. In 5A, the Woodland Hills Franklin Regional game. For Woodland Hills wins, they clinch the conference title. If Franklin Regional wins, we'll get probably a 3-way tie for the conference title with Penn Trafford. Penn Hills against North Hills for the second place spot in that conference behind Pine Richland. Aliquippa and Montour in probably the game of the week overall in the WPIAL, maybe in the state. Just an absolute showdown between top teams. Southmoreland and Elizabeth Forward for essentially the conference title in the 3A Interstate Conference. Seton LaSalle and KO for the conference title in the 2A Century Conference. And then Laurel against Southside Beaver in a very meaningful game in the 1A Big 7 Conference.
All good stuff.
Yes.
But that Aliquippa Montour, so as you mentioned, I mean, that has statewide implications.
Yes, it does. All right. Our broadcast from friends of the show. I mentioned earlier the KDKA radio news team with our friend Dan Zangrelli and his crew are going to be doing the Pine Richland North Allegheny game. Tune into the post game show. I've done a little bit to help those guys on the post game show get scores together and all that stuff. So occasionally they give me a shout out, which is very nice of them. They don't have to do that, but it's very nice of them to shout me out on the radio. I always appreciate that. But they've got a great game this week between Pine Richland and North Allegheny.
Doesn't get much better than that.
No, it does not. And then our friends out of Uniontown doing the Laurel Highlands Trinity game, which is actually a big game for Trinity to potentially set up a showdown with Bell Vernon for a playoff spot. And then if Trinity wants to get considered for a wild card, they definitely have to show out well against Laurel Highlands this week. All right. So our power rankings, we'll start at the bottom because that's easier. Our 4A, 3A, and 2A, 1A rankings stayed the same. Interestingly, both of us have Aliquippa ranked above Montour, so that'll be interesting to see how that plays out this week, if we are correct in our gut feelings or not. But in 6A, 5A, we had a little bit of a shakeup because Bethel Park did lose that close game to Upper St. Clair this week. So Bruce moved Bethel out of his rankings overall, and I just flipped Bethel and North Allegheny in my rankings, keeping them in the top 5. So Bruce, I'll let you talk about that, and I'll tell you why you're wrong and why I kept Bethel in my rankings.
Wow, I am wrong. Well, look, I don't think anybody is wrong. I just felt that, in the scheme of things, that I had Peters in my top 5 last week, and I think that the 2 6A teams there, Central Catholic and North Allegheny, are better than at this particular point, better than Bethel. But that's well, actually, it ends up being Peters, Central, and North Allegheny. But I liked that combination. Yeah.
All right. So here's why you're wrong. Friendly show. We have a good time on this show.
We do have a good
We do have
time.
a good time on this
I
show.
tell you what, we've rarely disagreed on rankings.
We have. This is true. So the reason I kept Bethel in my top 5 is Bethel Park lost to Upper St. Clair 14-10 on a last-minute touchdown pass that St. Clair threw.
Mm-hmm.
Peters Township lost to St. Clair 21-7.
Okay.
So looking at those two, those two will play each other next week. So Bethel and
Mm-hmm.
Peters will play each other. It'll get decided on the field. But looking at comparable results against a similar opponent, yes, they both lost to Upper St. Clair, but Peters lost by 14 and Bethel lost by 4 on a last minute touchdown pass. So, that was pretty much why I made my decision to keep Bethel in my top 5.
All right. So let me just so
The friendly
and,
banter is what the show is all about, though,
right,
right? We try and
exactly
be
right. And
entertaining and informative.
sure. And so, from that too, and I'm just gonna go take a look at Peters and maybe and look, I'll be the first one to tell you to admit that I was if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But looking at the teams and how they've stacked up against one another, um one, two,
They've played a lot of similar opponents,
they
actually.
have,
Yeah.
right, and I'm going to the Bethel there, over to Bethel Park here
Yeah.
again.
But the good news is they play each other next week, so it will get decided on the field.
um Bethel Park has only beaten one 6A opponent, where Peters has beaten two.
That's
um
fair.
would be, everything, the only thing that uh has come out around that. Upper St. Clair, yeah. um
Yeah.
they
I was
will not have, yeah, right, and they do play, so it will be settled on the field. So it's really the difference between, Upper St. Clair, the common opponent, one losing by 4, the other by 14. So
Yeah.
all right,
And
well,
that was how I made my decision. So all right. So our statewide power rankings, this is based on a formula that I dreamed up. So this also is fun because it gives Bruce an opportunity to talk about some of his Eastern teams. So the formula really likes the District 11 teams for some reason. I'm not 100% sure why it does, but it really does. Um, none of the District 12 teams appear in here. I did a little digging into that after our discussion last week. I think it's because some of those District 12 teams have played more out of state opponents, and they've
it
played
is.
some of the so they played some of the independents like the Malvern Preps of the world and things like
Yeah,
that. So
you somehow have to get that in your formula, but it is
yeah,
what it is. This is for amusement only, right?
right. And for some, just discussion points, but overall, in 6A, yes, we're missing the District 12 teams there. That will definitely be a factor, but I mean, these District 1 teams, District 3 teams, the decent decent kind of smattering of teams across different districts here in the at least the 6A rankings.
The only one that comes to mind, I mean, looking at it, that maybe a little bit out of whack, is the CB West. Other than that, it's hard to argue with the fact all these teams. I just saw State College dismantle CD East last week. So I can understand why they would have moved into the rankings. Manhunt Township, CB South, defending District 1 6A champs that are off to an 8-0 run again this year. So Freedom, Easton, Parkland, believe it or not, if the playoffs started today, they wouldn't be in. So yeah.
That's
So
wild.
very interesting there. And we just talked about that on Fresh Set of Downs. Looking at the 5As, um,
So
yeah, there's
in your
nothing.
in your defense, Bruce, my formula likes Peters Township more than Bethel Park in the 5A rankings. So
Well,
you
look
have
at
you
that.
have some defensibility for your other power rankings, but I think this also speaks to the fact that the WPIAL 5A teams have all performed very well this year. We've got a lot of really good teams. overall. But one of the things I tried to do when I made this formula up was to make it comparable across classifications. So, when I said earlier,
Mhm.
I thought Pine Richland could win 6A this year. Like Pine Richland's rating is higher than any 6A team
Yeah.
in the rank. So Pine Richland's actually my number one ranked team in the state in these power rankings. So,
Wow.
um, yeah,
Good stuff there. Strathaven really having a great season on the other side of the fence there. Conestoga Valley, they're playing an undefeated Exeter team this week. So yeah, believe it or not, 5A in District 3 has 8 teams that are 8-0. No,
wow,
17. 7 teams that are 8-0. So
that is wow,
yeah, right. So
yeah,
you got actually, and I'm just saying, for fans of the WPIAL, just go to and we break down very similar to the way that Ian does with his conferences, but we break it down by district to show the teams in 4A. Um, why missing beating Twin Valley, who was the number one team in 4A last week. Why don't we move on to 4A? And
yeah. The only other note I had was I looked it up quickly. Exeter is actually the number 11 ranked team in 5A.
okay.
So I have them right up there too. So in 4A, we've got Montour, TJ, Aliquippa out of the WPIAL, but also, as we've always said, 4A is really where you start to get that full statewide distribution of District 1, District 4, District 3, District 11, District 2. So a lot more representation from across the state in 4A.
Bishop Shanahan just beat Downingtown West last week, a 6A team. I was at that game last Thursday, and Shanahan had a 20 play 9-minute drive. It was that included 4 conversions on 4th down, and they scored the winning touchdown with 17 seconds remaining. Pretty incredible stuff.
That's
But
amazing.
that's a 4A team beating a 6A team. Um, LS, they're playing Why Missing this week, who not appearing in this film, but they basically beat number one Twin Valley, number one in the Penn Live rankings, Twin
Mhm.
Valley last week, and these are conference opponents. Lampeter, Strasburg, and Weil and Twin Valley are all in a round robin with each other in the Lancaster Lebanon League Section 4 um, championship. So that's pretty wild. And on 3A, Danville, I've liked all year. Really powerhouse team in
Danville's
3A.
been, I mean, just as an outside observer, they've been really competitive. I mean, they've been to the semifinals or so, like what, 3 out of the last 4 years or something like
Yeah.
that. So they've made some runs, but just
They're
like
not a
haven't
one
been
trick
able to,
pony by any stretch of the imagination, but
yeah.
boy, Amani is just looking like a real juggernaut. I mean, in the whole scheme of things. And don't sleep on that Western Wayne either. They have a big game this week as well. So yeah, Lewisburg just beat or just got Shamokin just beat Lewisburg. So that's Shamokin, who's number 4 in 4A, just beat
Mhm.
Lewisburg for their first loss. So, just kind of give everybody kind of the whole, picture of who are the teams that you're going to see down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think 3A statewide, 3A might be the most wide open classification for, who could potentially even just make it to the state title game because, yes, the WPIAL has performed very well. The WPIAL has made all 8 state championship games and won 7 of them in 3A. But, Amani's a really good team. This is not a knock on Amani Christian, but I just think the WPIAL overall in 3A, other than Amani, doesn't have that team that looks super dominant this year over
Mhm.
over everyone else. Doesn't have, like the Central Valley that just like runs the table on everybody this year. Now, yes,
Yeah,
obviously Central Valley's there, but they haven't looked as dominant as they have in past years.
yeah. Northwest Lehigh there at 8-0. They were in the state title game last year, so there's some another team who's just continued that run.
Yep. All right. On to the 2A and 1A rankings overall. Elwood City, after their win over Riverside, moved up to number 2 overall in the 2A rankings. Seton LaSalle and South Park both sitting there, along with South Allegheny as well from the WPIAL. But I think the biggest storyline in 2A is whether or not Southern Columbia is going to be able to overcome their somewhat shaky regular season to go on another run in the postseason.
No, we focused on that a little bit on Fresh Set of Downs. They've got to win probably both of their playoffs start this week. They've got to win their last 2 games if they expect to even to get into the postseason. And when they do, they're going to have to face Troy, who's 8-0. I mean, that's the number 1 seed in their district. Schuylkill Haven having a great year. They're averaging 54 points a game scoring wise. They won 81-7 last week. I mean, just nuts. Just pinball numbers going up there for Schuylkill Haven. And in 1A, the other thing is not appearing in this film is Steel High. They're likely to run roughshod in 2A, as well. And then on the 1A side there, Lackawanna Trail, Nativity, Line Mountain, those are all, decent teams as well. But, Guilfoyle out of District 6, they've got such a pedigree there. Same coach. That's a team I think to really watch out for. And I'm not sure in the 1A side whether they come out west or not.
They do. So actually, it's the way the 1A state bracket is set up. Both Guilfoyle and Westinghouse are part of the East bracket. So I think it's the WPIAL along with like District 10 and District 9 are the quote unquote West bracket, and then District 8, which is the Pittsburgh City League, along with District 6, which includes Guilfoyle and Altoona, is part of the East. So in theory, I mean, you could have a Guilfoyle Westinghouse state semifinal and then like a Pittsburgh City League versus WPIAL state championship game if Westinghouse gets through that, to have like a Westinghouse versus WPIAL team state title game, which would be just incredible story.
Yeah, always good to look ahead.
Yep.
At least for us sports guys, definitely you don't want to do that if you're a football coach. But even though they do look ahead, they tell us otherwise. So
yeah. Well, we do have a few coaches that watch the show, and we're very appreciative for those coaches.
Yes, we are appreciative.
We talk about it so they don't have to worry about it, basically.
Exactly. Sure.
All right. So our WPIAL look back, it's week 8. We're going back to 1984. A lot of historically strong teams did win titles. Mount Lebanon, so in 1980 was when the state moved to 4 classifications. So Mount Lebanon won 4 out of the first 5 Quad A titles. There's a picture of the 84 team coming back for a reunion a few weeks ago. Aliquippa beating Mount Pleasant in actually a rematch of the 83 championship game. And Aliquippa reached the finals 7 times in an 8-year span. Beaver Falls, pictured in the lower right-hand corner, got a close win over Riverside. And then Duquesne beat Rochester as well in the Class A title. But this was a huge win for Aliquippa because this was the beginning of the modern Aliquippa dynasty. I mentioned that they had reached 7 title games in 8 years, but it had been 20 years since their last actual championship. They won in 64 and then again in 84. The 64 one we covered a few weeks ago on the show. But they'd made the title game in 3 out of the prior 4 years, but they lost all 3 of them. They lost to Mount Pleasant the year before, and then played Mount Pleasant again, got out to a 14-0 lead in this game. Mount Pleasant came back, took a 15-14 lead in the 4th quarter, and Aliquippa had to put together a game-winning drive. I read an article from the game. Aliquippa's quarterback hadn't completed a pass all game, and they went for it on a 4th and 7, and he completed a pass, and that led to Aliquippa eventually scoring the game-winning touchdown. to the game and championship winning touchdown to win 20-15. And since 1984, Aliquippa's won 16 WPIAL titles over the last 40 years. So this
Wow.
84, the 84 one really was the beginning of the modern Quip dynasty. So a pretty meaningful year in Aliquippa history as well, because 1984 was the year that the steel mill closed down there. So that was huge for the community. Obviously, all those jobs left, and Aliquippa was founded as basically a company town around the steel mill there, and just one of those tragic stories that happened all throughout the region of steel mills closing, communities becoming impoverished, all those things that happened when the industries left in the 80s. So 84 was the year the mill left, but it was the year that Aliquippa's modern dynasty started, and they became, hugely successful on the football field, and is carried through. And by the way, we need to give a shout out and congratulations to our friend Mayor Walker out of Aliquippa. He got
Yep.
married this weekend, posted it on Twitter. So
Oh, wow.
Mayor Walker. Good for him.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Wow. Congratulations, Mayor Walker.
Yes.
We got to get him back on again.
We should get him back on. Yeah. Well, he's probably busy now,
Yeah. Well, right. Well, not next week. I mean,
Yes. All right. So if you have enjoyed listening to us talk tonight, we also have some other podcasts that we are a part of. One of them is Bruce's Fresh Set of Down show, which he actually recorded earlier this evening, because Bruce did a double dip tonight because Ian was out traveling yesterday for work. So Bruce did his double dip tonight, did both shows. So you can go check out that Fresh Set of Down show on the Sports Stream YouTube channel. And then my Steel City Blitz podcast, I'm on with a few other guys, airs on Thursday nights. So you can check that out if you want to hear me swear a little bit about the Steelers.
Yeah, started something new on Fresh Set of Downs. I sent out a lot of reminders or Zoom invites to guys, and we just kind of wait and see who shows up. And so something did, but we ended up with Dave Berman from District 1, did a great job breaking down everything at District 1, and then my broadcast partner for my Penn Live stuff, Dave Bray, and all of us, along with Dave Micah from Eastern PA Football, breaking down the District 3 stuff. I mean, some of the District 3 races are pretty incredible, along with District 1 and that. So good show to watch if you're interested in seeing, who might make it to the next level in, the PIAA football championships.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks everyone for joining us tonight. You can check out steelcityblitz.com. I've got an article on playoff clinching scenarios. We'll have our games of the week. We've got our standings page, and you obviously know where to find us on YouTube and social media. So thanks everyone for tuning into our show tonight. Thanks again to Coach Tarrant from Woodland Hills joining us on his anniversary, taking time away from his wife to talk football with us. So we really appreciate that. And thanks to all the fans that tune in live and watch the show later on. We appreciate you all. And next week we'll have our big, last week of the regular season show, where we'll be looking at, who's clinched playoff spots, who's got a chance to make it to the playoffs. And with the wild card this year, it's going to add a new dynamic. So we'll be talking a lot about that too.
Where did this season go? Where did it go? Crazy. I mean, it's gone. I mean, literal, not in the literal sense, but we've turned around in the season, and we're ready for playoffs. Hopefully, everybody will stick with us, Ian, and take us all the way through to our big extravaganza, Cumberland Valley preview and stuff like that. So for my buddy Ian McMeans, I'm Bruce Badgley. Hey, it's like Ernie Banks said, let's do two, which is what we did tonight. So check us out on demand, as well as not only this show, but Fresh Set of Down. So take care and drive safely.